All right, Josh, whenever you're ready.
All right, I'm ready. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for UB's Blackstone Launchpad powered by Techstar virtual workshop. My name is Josh Vachani. I'm a Blazer, a Launchpad intern, and I'll be your host tonight. As you may know, Launchpad is a campus-based entrepreneurship work network designed to help students succeed as a founder or contributor to the innovation economy. Today's topic is startup planning, market research. We are going to share with you all the resources available to you to help you venture as you research the industry, competitors, and so much more. We are delighted to introduce you to our colleagues from UB Libraries to speak about the resources available to you as students and friends of the university. So in a moment we'll begin. For all of you joining us this evening, our presenters will share their presentation and then we'll open it up to the audience. You're welcome to use the chat box or speak it up. Just make sure you unmute yourself. Sorry. Just make sure you are mute until that point. Thank you. So first, let me allow me to introduce you to Erin Rowley and Carolyn Klausbach-Russell. So Erin Rowley is the head of science and engineering library services at the University at Buffalo and serves as an engineering librarian. Before coming to UB, Erin was a head of a research team at a consumer products testing laboratory, specializing in international standards and regulatory research. At UB, she assists faculty, students, and staff with library resource, instructions, and engineering-related research, including standards, technical reports, and patents. Erin's research interests include the role of librarians in engineering education, entrepreneurship, and the role of technical industry standards in academic libraries. She holds the Masters of Library Science from the University at Buffalo and a BA degree in communication from SUNY Genso. We welcome you.
Hey, thanks very much. Hi, everyone.
Next, we have Carolyn Klausbach-Russell. I hope I spelled that correctly. I apologize if I didn't. She is a social science and government information librarian at UB Libraries, serving as a liaison to the School of Management, as well as the Department of Economics, Political Science, and Sociology. Prior to her current role, she was a research analyst at UB, building in-depth profiles of companies and executives. She also spent several years in marketing field working for a local software company. Carolyn's research interests include library collaborations in entrepreneurship and the role of academic libraries in the global study abroad programs. She holds a Master's of Library Science from the University at Buffalo, a BS degree in Computer Information Systems, and BA in History from SUNY Fredonia. We welcome you too, Carolyn.
Thank you. All right. I guess I'm going to take it away now.
Yeah, so you guys can present now.
Okay. Thank you for that introduction. That was great. I'm just going to share my screen. And can everyone see the presentation? Okay, thanks. Okay, so thanks for that great introduction. I'm just going to minimize this window here. So welcome to UB Library Resources to support your venture development. And so just, we had a great introduction already, so I'm just going to kind of say this is us here. And today's presentation, we're going to talk about market research. I'm going to go through some resources in the libraries, and then I'm going to turn it over to Erin, who's also going to address library resources through the standards and patents searching lens. So we're also going to cover some quick definitions of these areas, as well as the resources that are available. So for this example, we wanted to introduce a startup that like a sample startup. So we did make up a fictional startup, but we do find it a very cool startup. So you never know, we might create this ourselves someday. We are talking about step up style. So all of our examples are going to be related to the industry and the startup that we're talking about here. And this is an athletic shoe design app. And so our app is going to allow anyone who wants to build a custom athletic sneaker to do so. And it's going to let the user start with a blank white shoe and customize the overall color, like the toe, the tongue color, and include their custom arch support. We're also going to allow our own symbols and initials for greater customization. So that's just our sample. And I did want to start by pointing out that you can go to this link here. I'm just going to show you really quick. Everything that we're talking about and more today is on this guide. So you're going to go into, you'll see it'll take you right into the homepage, and market research, patents, standards, it's all across the top here. So if I go into market research, you'll see my contact info as well as all the databases in addition to others that I'm talking about. So this is a great place to go to refer back for links. So to dive in a little bit, market research is the process of gathering, analyzing, and interpreting information about a product, a service, so maybe whatever you're offering, the market itself, maybe the past, present, and potential customers for the product or service. And this is including any type of competitors that you might face. And typically you're looking at things like the characteristics of your potential customers, maybe their spending habits, what locations might your business be in, what is your target market? So answering all of those questions. And the reason I bring it up is because the #1 reason why startups fail, according to this Forbes article, was that there was no market need. And so there was no customer. So doing your research and being able to pivot if you find out that something might not be a viable product is very important in a startup industry. So market research can tell you, like I just mentioned, the viability. So is your idea even going to appeal to the right number of people to make it successful? You know, what target market should you be looking at? What your consumer opinions might be about services already out there. And it's going to influence any product decisions that you're making. So I like to say when starting your research to jot down some initial questions that you have. So what are some big decisions? Are you thinking of opening a new segment? Are you just getting started and need to know the basics about an industry? Just ask yourself some questions and jot those down. And then start broad. So start with your articles, current events, industry profiles. Maybe you want to find out more about the problem that your product or service is trying to solve. So those are good places to start. And then you can refine and focus from there. So from your broad research, you can pull out, maybe you need to know a specific statistic or a little bit more information about a certain population, or maybe you need to know about a patent or standard, which Erin will get into later. So for step up style, these are my 3 questions I wanted to focus on tonight. So are people buying footwear online? So are people even interested in this? Who are these people? What segments might I be able to start kind of categorizing them into? And who are my competitors? So who are some of the names out there that might be competing in the same space I am? So now to get into a few of the research tools, I'm going to first hit on articles and background research. So this is where you're going to start simple. So you're looking for those articles I talked about, industry profiles, news reports, those kinds of things. And you'll notice that I did put Google in this slide, and that's because I never want to tell you not to use Google for this type of research, because your competitors are on Google, your customers are on Google. There's a lot of information as far as customer opinions and reviews you can get on Google. I just don't want you to stop there. So I'm going to start by going into IBIS World, and this is going to be a industry-specific database, and it provides a ton of custom profiles on different industries. And what I like about IBIS World is that it doesn't just focus on main industries like clothing manufacturing. It gets very specific. I found a specialized report on bridal stores the other day. So it really covers a lot of area. And with IBIS World, you can search by NAICS codes, which are North American Industrial Classification System. That's what NAICS stands for. It's just simply put the way that Canada, Mexico, and the US, which is North America, standardizes industries. So if Canada's talking about classifying a business as a certain industry, that, you know, us in the United States, we know that we're talking about the same type of businesses. So you'll see when you get on, it's just a simple search. And you can either, if I know my industry code off the top of my head, which is not usual, I could just type it in and away I go. But for this example, I'm going to focus on, maybe I want to know more about shoes or footwear, because there's a couple different ways you can, a couple different terms you could use. So I'm going to try this one first. I'm going to hit search. And you'll notice I get 31 results. With IBIS World at UB, we have access to reports in the United States and China. So I'm actually just, for the sake of this example, limiting it to the United States by selecting the checkbox. And I encourage you to go through, you know, your first instinct is to go right into shoe and footwear manufacturing. I definitely encourage you to kind of go through and see what some of the options are, because as I scroll down a little further, I notice that there's online shoe sales in the US, which is a little bit more specific to what, you know, my business as being an app is going to be talking about. So I'm going to click into that. And as it loads, you're going to see the navigation pop up. There's going to be a great about section, just kind of detailing what the industry, you know, when they say online shoe sales, what is that encompassing? And apparently this is taking extra long today. There we go. So it's going to talk about, you know, greater online shopping activity and disposable income. So that's something I want to note right away. And in the supply chain here, I also see that there's some key industry drivers to know about. For example, you know, how many people have even access to internet? That's going to drive my supply chain. And then disposable income. So this is an important thing for me to remember. If I'm thinking kind of about what's going on right now with COVID, there is some concern about people's disposable income. So it's good to make note of that. As we go on, you'll see some major players. Right here, this is already telling you 3 potential competitors that you're going to want to look into. And it's going to give me similar industries. So a lot of information here about, you know, what might be related if I ever wanted to expand into different areas. And I like this additional resources tab. This actually brings up, you know, relevant links like internet retailer. You know, it brings up a reliable web page that I could go to for some further reading. I also like that it gives you some industry jargon. It defines some terms for you. So if you're new to this industry, you can kind of get a sense of what we're going to be talking about. And then I'm also going to go into products and markets really quick here. Again, we see the supply chain. But here I wanted to point out they already break up a lot of the segmentation for you, just to give you an idea of some of the initial segments you might want to think about. As you can see, women's dress shoes, casual footwear, clearly the largest segment, but right behind that is men's athletic shoes. So that's something to consider. Also, the industry revenue is 14.7 billion. And so it's important to know, you know, the percentage that athletic shoes might make up in this space. And it's a great thing to highlight as far as, you know, if you're pitching to investors, you know, what is the potential revenue that's out there for these types of markets? and just demand determinants. So this is something that's going to play into, you know, what is going to make a consumer demand this product more or less. And this is just a lot of great information to read over. People are talking about competitiveness of brick and mortar stores. Women age 35 and older make up the largest target market, for example. And then just other major markets. So again, a lot of information that you can find through here. The nice thing about IBISWorld is you might also want to consider, you know, this isn't just shoe sales, this is also app. We're developing an app. So I'm going to type in app development up here. And it brings you into another specialized report that you can read a little bit more about app and how it's actually classified as an industry in IBISWorld. You can also, this is loading, but you can actually download all the charts and the graphs that you see. So if I'm trying to find, let's go into products and markets. I think there's a couple better graphs, but you can export these easily into image files or into a CSV table. So you can actually insert them into presentations, which might make your presentation pop a little bit more. So just going back here, like I said, I'm just going to dive into a sampling of each slide that I'm talking about, but I encourage you to, you know, we're always happy to talk more about your specific needs and which resources might be the best. But going into facts and figures, so this is if you need a little bit of like a nitty-gritty detail. And a lot of people don't realize that the US Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, for example, put out a ton of demographic information every year. Anything from, you know, income to, you know, where people live, if they make the most money, if they are single, if they have a family like unit, they live in a household, how much they pay on rent. The Bureau of Labor Statistics actually has a great survey called the Time Use Survey, and that tells you how many hours a day people spend on certain activities. So it'll tell you, you know, women spend 0.15 hours vacuuming every day, you know, for example. It's a pretty detailed survey as well. I am going to go into Policy Map really quick just to show you how easy it is to map certain statistics. So just to show you income, I can easily go in here and go into, you know, family, look at median family income for the whole United States. This breaks it up by county. You can easily dive in. You can kind of see where some of the biggest earning areas are for median income. And this is like quality of life, just to show you, you can actually find, you know, what type of computer access people have and what types of, you know, computers they have. So it's, you can find out a lot of information through here. All right. I also wanted to, sorry, really quick. On our research guide, I didn't put these in the slide, but there's this segment tool that I like to use. So say you're thinking about, you know, who you might want to sell your product to, and you're wondering about like how to segment different types of people out. So you've heard, you know, about probably, let's see, upper crust, wealthy, mature, without kids. So you probably have seen some types of these market segments broken out before, but this tool makes it very easy to do. I will say it's limited because they want you to buy their full version, but you can actually find out quite a bit of information just through this small demo. So if I hit narrow segment, let's see, I want to find somebody with household income in mid-scale and upscale areas, because, you know, I'm looking for people with disposable income. And I also want to see age here, because I'm thinking of selecting, you know, my more younger into middle-aged segments, because I am building an app, and through some of my research, I do know that, you know, younger people tend to use that more. So now I see the results here, and I can go in. These are anybody who fits those two categories. So let's see if I can go into young and influential. Let's see something. So like I said, they won't let you go into every single area here because of it. They want you to pay for the full version, but you can see this whole snapshot here, which gets you thinking about, you know, the education level, employment level. You know, typically these are management professionals. It also shows you some of the major cities that these people live. And so you can, like, kind of as expected, you see a lot in California here. But so the red is going to indicate the highest concentration of people of these demographic traits that fit this category. So you can still find out, like I said, even lifestyle and media traits, some of the things that this company says as typical among this demographic. So it already is giving you some interests and more information. All right. So really quick, just hitting on a couple other UB-only databases. Social Explorer will actually map and chart census data for you. It's a little bit like Policy Map, but it's sleeker. And as a UB student, you have some options here because we have a subscription, so you can download anything you want from there. And then eMarketer is it's all about digital marketing and e-commerce. So for our example, we're definitely going to want to look at this because we are developing an app. So I'm just going to do a quick app, or I'm going to do a quick search for see here. So here we see shifting consumer behavior, for example. And this is focused on talking a little bit more about the pandemic and COVID. And we can see there's a decreased spending in apparel, for example, and different things that might affect our market segment. So, you know, a good thing to keep in mind. We also see, let's see, most consumers are shopping via mobile amid the pandemic. So there's a lot of conflicting, you know, people are going to continue shopping mobile and that trend. So maybe once we get past the pandemic and people's, you know, expendable income come up again, disposable income comes up again, maybe that trend will stick and that will be the time to really push this app. But you can see again, this is saying that that younger segment is shopping online significantly more than the older segments, which is what we would typically expect. So what did I learn through all this research? So just kind of showing you how we can summarize all this research into actionable answers here. So people are buying footwear online. This is a $14.7 billion revenue industry. And athletic shoe sales are growing rapidly, as the report said. And more people than ever are shopping online due to COVID. Excuse me. I do need to consider the financial impact of COVID because my customer might be losing disposable income. And who are these people? As we talked about, you know, women do tend to buy more shoes online, but men make up a larger majority of the athletic shoe market. So, you know, and I also might want to consider that younger middle-aged segment with higher income. And who are my competitors? I'm up against, you know, we saw Nike, we saw Amazon in there. You know, I'm up against some big names, but I really believe that I have enough of a standout product because those companies are not doing the customization that, you know, I plan to do. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I'm stop sharing my screen.
Great.
I'm going to turn it over to Erin.
My screen, and we'll continue on the presentation. While I do that, though, Carolyn, it sounds like I think we're on the right track here. Though I think our idea is pretty good. So
Yeah.
The market research is showing us that so far, and we're going to talk about next steps here. So hopefully everybody can see my screen now, which is a continuation of the presentation. Okay, great. Okay, so we've got this great app. We've got some really great customized shoes. We've started to look at the market research, and Carolyn and I did set up today's talk in a way that we think most people might approach this in terms of what the order of what the things you'd want to research. Now you could research some of these things concurrently and do it all at the same time. But you probably will want to know the market information a little bit sooner than you start to get into some of the other details like standards and patents. So now we're going to talk about standards first. And I always like to ask first or give a quick definition, like what is a standard? Because they're not always documents or information sources that people are aware of. So I have a couple of definitions here. One from the European Committee for Standardization. They define a standard as a technical document designed to be used as a rule, guideline, or definition. It is a consensus-built, repeatable way of doing something. Now, the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO, defines it as an international standard. It provides rules, guidelines, or characteristics for activities or for their results aimed at achieving the optimum degree of order in a given context. It can take many forms, which I think really sums it up. Even the definition of standards is not standard. Everyone seems to have a different definition as to what it really is. I mean, even the term standard is sort of this, it's ironic that there's no standard definition for it is what it comes down to. So it's really important though to understand, especially in the context of this scenario, is that standards impact everyday life. So I always like to use this particular image. It's from an ASTM guide to care symbols, so the ASTM standard D5489. These are all of the symbols. You might recognize some of these from the care labels on your own clothing articles, even like bedding. You might notice that it says machine wash cold, tumble dry low, or you might see these symbols, or you might see both. And you might have wondered why these weird symbols are on there. You know, the wash one, looks like it's a bin with water. That sort of makes sense. It's hard to say why bleach is a triangle, but that's what it is. But really what it is that everyone has come to this agreement for ASTM that these are the care symbols that will be used. So that way it's not really up to all the companies that make them, you know, what to use. So I just like to use this because usually people have seen something like this in their clothes. And so that just is one example of how standards impact everyday life and certainly business as well. Some important things to remember before we get into how you can search for standards and determine if there's something that you need to care about. Standards are reviewed and updated frequently. They are not a document that is created once and left alone forever. They are updated, as I said, frequently, especially as things change. You know, as technology changes, as we understand how to make things safer and better, standards are updated accordingly. And they're usually at the forefront of all of that to help ensure that the products that we buy are safe and that maintain a certain level of quality. It's also important to know about mandatory versus voluntary. This is a very tricky thing. It took me a long time to wrap my head around. Just because these documents exist doesn't mean that you have to follow them in most cases. So when we think about something, a rule that we have to follow, I think of like a law or a regulation. That means we have to do it, right? You know, if you're going too fast on the street based off the speed limit sign, you're breaking the law because that's not safe. Well, in the US, and I'm going to stick with the US here because other countries handle things differently and it starts to get complicated really fast. So with the US, standards are considered voluntary unless they happen to be named, so called out specifically in a law or regulation, and that does happen. There are government workers, politicians, you know, and anybody that helps create the laws and regulations that regulate our society that we have to follow. They can call out standards, especially if they think that standard will help make things safe that they think really should be safe. So an example of like an everyday object where this happened is our toys. So toys that children play with, we want those to be safe, right? We don't want them to have something fun and then get hurt or worse just by using something that they're supposed to have fun with. So there are laws for toys that call out an ASTM, toy safety standard, to ensure that toys all meet the same sort of safety quality requirements. So again, this is a tricky thing to know. How do you know if a standard is mandatory? Well, you'd have to do a little bit of legal research. And that's something that, again, like, as I'll probably say multiple times during my portion here today, that's always a question you can reach out to me with. I'm not a lawyer, but I can help you with doing some standard searching and trying to determine if that's a mandatory standard or not. So another important thing to remember about standards is that there are versions. So related to the point that they are updated frequently, just because they're updated doesn't mean all of the versions go out the window. So they update it, we don't throw away all the other versions. They're kept usually in perpetuity because older versions, and sometimes called superseded or canceled, can still be really useful. Why? Because maybe that older version is called out in a law or regulation. Sometimes when politicians or whoever, powers that be, create these laws and regulations, they call it a very specific version, or usually like a year a standard was created. And if they don't update the law or regulation when the standard is updated, it continues to be that older version of the standard that is mandatory, again, until they update the law. And sometimes laws are updated to reflect these new standards, sometimes they're not. So again, it's just another layer to standards. And it's important to know, I think, as you continue into this journey of determining if standards are something you need to care about. So a question I sometimes would get too is like, don't you usually have to pay for these standards, and aren't they expensive? Well, yes, to both questions. Unfortunately, yes, yes, you usually do have to pay for standards. And yes, they can be expensive if you need a lot of them, or if you need to continually buy them if they're updated. If you only need one standard and it hasn't been updated in years and years, that document might be $50, $100, $150. Still not free, but it might not be, I'm not talking tens of thousands of dollars. But if you have a product that, or products, as your business expands, and you need to review the standards that you need to follow in order to make sure that you're manufacturing and producing a product that meets certain quality standards, certain safety standards, etc. You need a lot of standards, and they're all updating all the time. It can be a cost, and that's a cost that you might need to absorb to do business. However, there are some resources available to access some standards for free. And if you are affiliated with UB, of course, we do have some standards available electronically to search and view. So, and we're going to talk about that specifically. So, where do you start? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I'm going to show you exactly where you start. It's back on that UB Library Resources guide to support your venture development. So I'm going to open this up. And as Carolyn was showing here, we have tabs all up at the top. I'm going to click on technical standards. Sometimes they are called out as technical standards, sometimes industry standards, just to differentiate it, especially if you were talking about, oh gosh, like standards for education, right? That there are certain standards that have to be met for education purposes. They're still standards, but they're not generally technical in nature, at least not in the sense of how they're used in entrepreneurship generally. So, so they're referred to as quite a few things. Again, especially with a term that's as simple as standards, it can start to get confusing. So, so it's labeled as technical standards here. I have a couple other interesting definitions here that I've added, of like, think of standards as a formula that describes the best way of doing something. Also a really great definition, also from ISO. From here, I give all sorts of important information, hopefully, on like why standards are important, how they can impact our everyday lives, including how standards are everywhere. There's a great website called Standards Boost Business that's great to check out. A video that I've included now that I've been updating this particular page of the guide on like what standards do for you. This is a great short video from ISO that's great to watch. Just to get a better sense as to exactly how standards impact all of our lives, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. There's also some information on locating standards and freely accessible standards. So standards that are called out in laws and regulations, it seemed a little unfair to some, especially to have those documents be have a fee attached to them if you have to absolutely follow them. So you can use this, what they call the Incorporated by Reference portal, to search for standards to see if they're accessible there. Again, those are the documents that are called out. Those are the standards called out in various laws and regulations. So that's why they are freely accessible. If you can't download them, you usually can't print them, but they're there for you. We do have the full text access to standards, as I was mentioning before. These are restricted to UB only, but these are really great tools. So if you're here, you know, it's never a bad idea to just poke around and see what's in here. I'm going to stick with this ASTM Compass. This provides full text access to all of the ASTM standards that are in here, as well as all the versions of the standards of all the ASTMs, because like I said, all those versions, it's important. And so there's a lot of versions in here of all the various standards. Now it has a search box, just like any search engine, just like any database. And this is a database of just standards. And you can search this, you know, like you would. You can try with keywords. But keep in mind, these are technical documents. So if I was to search the term shoes, you can search it, and there will likely be things that come back, but it might not be exactly what you need. Now, of course, I've got to keep talking. Oh, there we go. I thought it was going to take a second here to load, but that loaded up pretty quick. Searching shoes, we got the first one here. All of this information here is the standard number. So you'll always start with a standard designation. So what is the organization that's created this standard? In this case, it's ASTM, but there's lots of other organizations, more information on that back on the guide. But then this number here, starting with a letter followed by numbers and the dash, this indicates the year or the version. And then this is the actual number. ASTM is one of the few, if not only, that uses letters in their standards numbering system, but there you go. So most of them are usually just a single number, sometimes many digits long, but a number. And then we have the title of it, Standard Test Method for Dynamic Water Resistance of Shoe Upper Leather by the Maser Water Penetration Tester. So sometimes the names of these things are a mouthful. Some of them are very, very specific. So we've got something, it's clearly about a shoe, but maybe not exactly what we were looking for. If we scroll down, we can see something about running shoes. So that's interesting. And then even an athletic shoe. So that's getting closer. But let's think about the words we're using here. And maybe we're going to do a word like Carolyn was using for her searching before. She did shoes or footwear. I'm going to try footwear and see what I get now. Now running this search, all of a sudden I'm getting some other standards coming in up at the top here. ASTM does allow you to search some standards that are outside of our subscription, like these UNEN ISOs. So ISO is an international standard. EN is the European standard. Sometimes the powers that be join forces and they create these mega standards that are shared across multiple different organizations. I'm seeing again, I'm footwear now, but now I'm seeing some things that are not necessarily, again, I don't see anything athletic popping out. And there might be a general standard out there for your product that doesn't have to be as specific as what you're looking for. But just for our purposes today, to show you how you can progress with your searching, this is generally not a super quick process. It depends on what your product is. I'm going to search for athletic footwear. And now I'm going to get a few more things that seem to be a little bit closer. We're back to some ASTM standards, but we've got the standard practice for fitting athletic footwear. We've got standard test method for traction characteristics, so that's interesting. Any of these, if you want to open up, you can click on the PDF to jump directly to the PDF version of it, or you can click on the title, and that will take you directly into the full text of the standard just in your browser window. But from here, you can see a table of contents generally, and you can work through it that way. Now, I do have tips on how the best to read the standard, and it generally is not a good idea to read it start to finish, just as a general tip. I won't go into all of that today just for time purposes. Usually I like to look at the scope, which is somewhat of a summary or an abstract of sorts, to get a general idea of what it's covering. I also really like to look at the terminology to see exactly what they are defining here and what it's covering. Sometimes there's very specific areas and you can see very quickly by looking at the terminology that this might not be the standard for you. And then from here, I usually go back up to the table of contents to then look at the various sections to determine, you know, what do I really want to look at? Do I want to jump down to the measurement procedure or what have you? Again, some of these standards can be very long, so it's not always a great idea in that case to read it start to finish, but rather just jump around to the sections that you need. Okay, now back to our presentation here. That was standards. I'm going to also cover the topic of patents. So because of that, we're just going to spend a little bit of time on patents here today. Just to give you a sense, like Carolyn can do a whole workshops just on very specific aspects of market research. Same goes for me in standards and patents. I've done workshops on just those individual pieces, you know, hour-long just on those. So we're really just scratching the surface here today and hopefully making you aware of like what these, especially in the case of standards and patents, what they even are and why you might want to care. Now, in terms of patents, what are patents exactly? A patent gives its owner the right to exclude others from making, using, and selling the patented invention. And it's very important to note, to even get a patent, to be patentable, an invention must meet 3 criteria. It must be novel, it must be useful, and it must be non-obvious. So it has to meet all 3 of those every single time. So that's important to know. So not all products, not all inventions out there are patented. That's really important to know. The patent process can be long and it costs money. I am also not an official patent searcher. I am not a patent attorney. If you are going down the road of patenting, there are resources available for you. I'm just going to give you a general sense in case you're not familiar with patents or why it's important to know in this process. That's the goal of my piece here today. So we'll talk about those resources in just a second. Yes, the e-law clinic, for example, great suggestion. I love it. So that's exactly right. So why are patents important? As I just mentioned, a patent protects the owner. That's the idea, right? Like generally I always used to think like if I have a patent, I must have had a really cool idea and now no one can steal it. So, and that's basically true. There's probably a few more nuances than that I'm sure any patent attorney would argue, but they're also a very rich source of scientific and technical information. And this is information that may not exist elsewhere. It might not exist in research articles, journal articles that exist out there, or other sort of technical reports. So it's sort of this exchange. In order to get that protection as the patent owner, you have to give up the details. That's really what it comes down to. And that's why patents can be very, very long and very, very dense, because you have to give all those details if you want the patent protection. It's also really important because you can help determine if similar products exist. So this is like another form of competitor research in a way, especially if you have a product, an invention that has really unique features and you want to see if anybody else out there has it, or you're improving upon something that already exists and you want to see, did anybody else figure this out yet? That's another way that patents are important. Now, searching for patents, the great news about all of these resources is that all of these are freely accessible. All of these databases listed here you can use while you're at UB, when you're no longer at UB, at any point in time, anybody can use these. These are all freely accessible. And we're going to jump into that oops, sorry, I thought I had one more slide there. We're not ready to learn about what we learned yet. We're going to go back to that guide. We'll go over here and we're going to click on patents. And here we have, again, information on what patents are, getting started about what types of patents exist. Again, another video that might be helpful to look at. And then we have all the various patent databases. I do list this ESPASnet, which is from the European Patent Office. I list that first, but I personally am a fan of Google Patents. It's a personal thing. I just really enjoy it. So that's where I typically go. Now, the most important thing I can stress here is that searching for patents is tricky. Anybody that's ever seen me talk before about patents will know that that's always one of the first things I say. In fact, when I'm asked to talk about patents in various engineering classes, I will always stress to, if you need patents, please, please don't hesitate to contact me. Again, I'm not an official patent searcher, and there are resources like the UB Technology Transfer Office, going to the eLaw Clinic that are available to you if you are really interested in going down that road yourself. But if you're just curious, you can absolutely search. Just know it's not as straightforward as searching regular Google when you're searching Google Patents. Now I'm going to try something just similar to what we were looking at before, and with standards and search for athletic footwear. This is a fairly straightforward search. And yes, we're definitely getting results. We were getting more than 88,000 results, as we can see up here. And we can see things right off the bat that look like athletic footwear. Now, if there were specific features of the footwear that we wanted to focus in on, we might need to add those as additional terms. It's always a good idea to use this area over here on the left-hand side to add in additional terms over here. Otherwise, it sometimes tries to be a little bit too smart, I find, and try to group words together that don't always need to be grouped together. And it can sometimes be a little bit messy with the search results. But this is fairly straightforward to get an idea. Again, there's other tips and tricks I have to offer for searching patents, but I won't get into those today. Don't hesitate to contact me if you're interested, and I'm always happy to meet and talk separately. But as you can see here, there is footwear here. Something you might notice, I'm clicking on one just so you can start to see what a patent here looks like in Google Patents, but you might notice that both of my examples, I focused on the footwear part of our idea of the Step Up Style app and not the app. Are there standards for apps? There are standards in the sense of there are certain things that you have to meet in terms of, generally speaking, for accessibility when you're talking about a web application or a mobile application. There are things that you might need to consider when it comes to securing people's data and privacy, when you're talking about taking people's information, personal information, credit card information, financial security. So there are things to consider there, but there aren't going to be necessarily the same sense of quality safety standards that exist for maybe a product, like a physical item of a shoe. And are there patents for apps? Yes, people will patent apps. There are a whole schools of other thoughts on different opinions on whether that's worth it because of how long it takes to patent something and the money that's involved to do that. But I just thought I would mention that because I usually get that question of, are there standards for apps? Are there patents for apps? Again, yes, but just in a different realm. And so I always find using a product, like in this case, shoes, that people, hopefully everybody knows what shoes are, so that way sort of makes the connection there. But I'm gonna go back. This is just to show you again, what a patent looks like. You can get more information here on the timeline as to when this patent application came through. You can see the images that exist. There are always claims. That's always good to know too about what the purpose of this particular patent really is. You can get more information there if the abstract above isn't helpful. But that's my, scratching the surface version of patents. Now back to our, what did I learn? So are there standards for athletic footwear? Yes, generally speaking, we learned in a very quick manner that there are standards for athletic footwear, searching just for ASTM standards. So yes, there could be other standards from other organizations, but searching for ASTM standards, we did find some that could be potentially relevant. We didn't do a deep dive into it, but yes. And do we need to patent this product? Well, the quick answer to that is it depends. Do we want to go through the process of patenting an app? Not quite sure there. We're not sure, Carolyn and I, yet in our process, if our shoe is really going to be that unique, different than others. It's really more the experience that we're providing. So maybe we don't need to patent the actual athletic shoes because they're still similar to others that are out there on the market. It's just our process, our experience that's different. So those are just a few of the things we learned when talking about this. And to just wrap things up, again, we have the link for that guide that we had put together. Carolyn and I are always updating that guide with new information, especially based off feedback and questions we get in workshops like this, where we start to learn more about what people need for their venture development in entrepreneurship. So we're always check out that guide. You can always access at least the guide, even if you're not at UB, maybe not all of the resources, but we try to include freely available information there. And we also always include this UB Libraries visitor information. So even if you're affiliated with UB today, if you're not in the future and you want to come back and use our resources, there's some additional information there. And as I mentioned in the chat earlier, we are definitely going to make all of these slides available to all of you. We'll send all these over to Alex as a PDF, and I'm sure she'll get these out to you, but we'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any at this time. We did manage to leave a few minutes for questions. But thank you, of course, first and foremost, for attending today, for your attention. It's always a really exciting time to do these. I'm speaking on behalf of Carolyn, but I always really enjoy this.
Thank you guys so much for sharing these great resources. I invite the audience to join me for thanking the presenters with a virtual round of applause. So you can just, yeah.
Thank you.
We'll now open the Zoom for questions. Remember, you may drop them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask question directly. We'd love to see you guys, so you can also enable the videos.
We've answered all the questions, Carolyn.
Really good job. Oh, here's a question. Here's a question. Kyle asked, how long does it take on average for a patent to go through?
Yeah, it can be a long time. I'll fully admit, again, as not an official patent searcher or a patent attorney, I'm not completely aware of how long it takes. It can definitely take, I believe, at least a year, if not more. So I think, there's a lot of nuances to that. So that's where, again, that's a great question to ask at the eLaw Clinic, I think. So. But thanks, that's a good question. Always a lot of questions about patents. I always, they're a really interesting information source. I've been talking to students, it feels like all week long, about patents, and so it's really interesting to see what's out there and what people come up with. That's for sure. Just to even Google around and Google patents, search around just for your own enjoyment. It's always interesting.
I'll say too that I know I touched on so many links that are available for market research. And like Erin said, I just wanted to chime in that we've only scratched the surface. So it might be beneficial to meet one-on-one about something and just go through and have, Erin and I recommend some resources that are specific to your idea. So that might be a great way, just as like a follow-up to do that. And we're happy.
Totally.
We love meeting with students about their startup ideas.
We really do, yeah. And we can, if you're not sure if standards or if you just need market research, reach out to both of us. We're happy. We've met with students together, via Zoom. Hopefully one day it'll be in person again, because we always love doing that too. But we're happy to meet and talk a little bit more. It's amazing to hear all of the ideas that are coming out of UB. It's just fascinating, and it's really exciting to even be a small part of, involved in a small part of the process.
Seems like we don't have any other questions on the table. Once again, thank you so much, Erin and Carolyn. We greatly appreciate you sharing all the resources with us today. To our audience, thank you so much for joining, and stay tuned for the next workshop focused on using Canva for your startup. Don't forget, we are hosting UB Startup Weekend, October 23rd through 25th. 3 days, 7 teams, 54 hours, and 1 goal. Startup Weekend is an intensive, in-depth, and an inspirational crash course on building a business off the basis of an idea. You will be paired with a team of young, diverse entrepreneurs tasked to pull together ideas of innovation, excellence, and convenience into a comprehensive business model that for sure will have a positive impact on the world. I'll make sure I drop the registration links in the chat box below. As always, we have our venture coaching and any expert hours being offered online this semester, of course. I'll make sure I drop the link for that too. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Be safe and have a great night. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Caroline and Erin. That was awesome.
Oh yeah, as always, thanks for the invitation. It's always a pleasure.
Well, enjoy the rest of your night.
Yes, you do the same.
Thanks, you too.